mean, what is your economic plan moving forward for people who are living paycheck to paycheck and struggling for groceries and rent and homeowners?
So look, I grew up, so my sister and I were raised by our mother. We lived for a long time in an apartment on top of a child care center. I, from a child, knew who our small business owners are, right? I mean, you're business leaders, but you're also civic leaders. You take seriously your voice and how you can mentor, how you can grow, right? Communities and the sense of communities. I love our small businesses. So a lot of my work, even in the Senate, was about increasing access to capital through our small businesses and in particular through our community banks. Mm-hmm. So I've been responsible for billions of dollars more now going into our community banks because they're in the community and then they know who's in the community and where the talent is and who's doing good in the community, what the community wants. Mm-hmm.
I'm just so confused. Joining me now, my friend Tiana Lowe Doescher, columnist with the Washington Examiner, to make us smarter economically. All right, Tiana, as you know, I'm stupid and uneducated. So could you please explain to me what she just said there?
I don't think she knows what she just said there. It's emotional support economics. Look, when she thinks about people complaining about grocery prices, she's envisioning the Brentwood country farmers market, you know? People with their designer groceries, getting organic this, farm to table that. That's not the reality for the average American. The average American is getting their groceries from a grocery store that is a big block chain that has about a 1% to 2% profit margin, smaller than almost any other industry, right? And food prices have moved on par with overall prices, about 20% since Joe Biden and Kamala Harris took office. It's everything else that's gotten even more expensive. Service prices, housing, all of that. And she has no answers for that. Casey Mulligan, the economist from University of Chicago, did a study that found the majority of the excess inflation that we've had in the past 4 years was stoked by the 2 tie-breaking votes that Harris cast as president of the Senate for the $2 trillion American Rescue Plan and then the $1.3 trillion Inflation Reduction Act, which, as we know, did nothing of the sort. In terms of what she wants to do to fix it, she wants to come down on the grocery stores, which again, we've established have about a 1% to 2% profit margin, and scene. That's it. There is no real plan.
It's still, I'm flabbergasted by that number, and I know that number. I can't believe there's any industry anywhere that runs on a 1% to 2% profit margin that just floors me. It absolutely blows me away. But anyway, let's not major on the minor here. Tiana, I try to not think about this. I try to not think about how completely screwed we are economically if she wins, because you know me, I think we're screwed anyway. I don't think there's anything that can stop a $35 trillion debt train. But gosh, are we turbo screwed if that woman wins, right?
Yeah, because the issue with inflation is that it's cumulative, right? You don't want to have deflation because deflation really screws with the economy, and it's usually associated with dramatic real economic losses, massive unemployment, Great Depression style deflation, right? And we don't want to have actual disinflation. What we do want is inflation to stop increasing or, stabilize at that 1% rate it was at when, Donald Trump left office. And then you want to have a bunch of economic growth make up the gap. Donald Trump is a spending issue. Donald Trump has no real plans to cut spending. However, he's good on growth. So what you can do if you don't dramatically increase the spending, if you deregulate the economy, right? Trump was the first president in, 15 years that actually saved money with regulatory policy rather than add on to the deficit. Even George W. Bush wasn't good about this. The last person that did this even kind of was Bill Clinton. Donald Trump actually wound up saving a bunch of taxpayer money through deregulatory policy because you get more economic growth, and that increases the tax base. Look, you would think with what everyone on the left says about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that we would have a tax revenue issue, but we don't. Tax revenue was up 11% this fiscal year, last fiscal year to this fiscal year, with corporate tax revenue up 29%. And that's with the Trump tax cuts, right? The evil corporate tax cut giveaways still in effect. we are getting more tax revenue overall and more corporate tax revenue than we ever have in this country's history. The issue is the spending. So on the one hand, you can have growth, and that helps offset some of it because we know the Laffer curve is a thing. We know we need more economic growth, the better. It's better for you. It's better for me. It's better for our neighbors' jobs. It's also good for the tax base. But on the spending element, the issue with Harris is you aren't going to get any more of the deregulatory policy because you've already seen what she wants to do deregulatory-wise, plus with more spending. You and I both at least understand supply and demand. So if we have a housing crisis right now, which we do, we have way too few homes because the Fed kept interest rates at 0 for 14 years. The solution is not to throw money at the consumer. The demand is already there. The solution is to build the houses.
Tiana, can you explain, we'll sidestep Kamala and for a few moments, can you explain why deflation is bad? Because people see their dollar hasn't gone as far, obviously because we've had inflation, and people want it to go back. They want it to deflate, but you say it's bad, and you're correct about that, but people don't understand why. Can you please explain why?
So let's just say you are buying a big durable good, something like a refrigerator or a television, something you don't buy regularly. You have money for it. You don't need to, take out a loan, but it is a bigger expense. And if you think that the price of consumer electronics are going down 5% every single month, and remember, we've had consumer spending categories where they have increased by multiple percentage points in a month under this inflation. So let's reverse it. Let's say TVs are going down in price 5% every single month. Everyone's not going to spend their money, and you don't want to bring the economy to a halt. You don't want everyone just holding on to their dollars indefinitely. It's different if you're investing. If you are investing it in the stock market, if you're investing it in, small businesses, if you're investing it in bonds, that's different. That helps fuel economic growth. But the incentive structure is removed in a radically deflationary environment. There's a reason why the 1 to 2% inflation, which is the Federal Reserve target, it's what we had for 4 years from 2017 through 2020, including through COVID. We had that very minimal, stable, expected inflation. So for instance, an employer knows I'm going to get a 2% cost of living adjustment in this normal environment. And hopefully economic growth means I can give more performance-based raises. That doesn't happen when you don't know what's going to happen to price stability. And it's why the goal for the Fed isn't no inflation, it's price stability. It makes it so much easier for, the folks in charge of companies and factories and the big physical elements of the economy that need to be prepared.
Tiana, how did the Democrats like Kamala Harris, how did they become the party of big business? Because they very much are. Obviously, they sell themselves as being for the little guy and the poor man. But no, all the major Fortune 500 companies, not all of them, but pretty much all of them, are run by filthy commies who support Democrats. Now, when and how exactly did that happen?
There's obviously been the polarization from what we could just call the expert class. The reason why you had a bunch of economists swear that doing an extra $2 trillion of American Rescue Plan spending wouldn't stoke inflation, even though we had just put an unprecedented $4 trillion in the economy because of COVID, right? So you have the Democratic Party base has obviously become much more college-educated, professional degree, right? Kamala Harris she has a 40-point lead with college-educated white women. Where you see everything backslide is voters without degrees have gone overwhelmingly to the right, and that's across racial lines. The secondary reason for why this has happened, other than just the ideological capture, the fact that things like ESG, DEI, these have become mandates within these companies. I mean, it's why you see Robin DiAngelo getting hired by Netflix, and climate change goals for Coca-Cola. On top of that, going back to the 14 years of 0% interest rates, it made it so that way we made the cost of borrowing free, and it made it a lot easier to give away. It's a lot easier to make a profit when debt is free, and for these companies to have engaged in these social experiments, in these political social experiments. And now it's much more difficult, and they just want to get back to free money, easy access, and a government that can bail them out.
Tiana, finally, we don't talk enough about the economic impact of illegal immigration. Obviously, every time there's a drug overdose or a rape or a murder or something terrible like that, it hits the news. But the American people don't really understand the impact this has on the education system, the medical system, the housing crisis. Economically, importing people by the million and then paying them to be here is devastating for the American citizen, and that's Kamala Harris's policies.
Yeah, that's been the explicit policy for the last 4 years. And you know me, Jesse, I am a pro-free market, pro-immigration, libertarian in economics. However, that's not the system that we have. So on top of the fact that you have states like California, where California, all undocumented immigrants are entitled to Medi-Cal, which is their state-sponsored health insurance. You have other states that also use federally subsidized, that means federally funded Medicaid, that are given to undocumented immigrants. And this would be different if they were paying into the system, but they aren't always. And so that's why you have this dramatic insolvency, right? Like Social Security actually, to an extent, is more safe from this than the major healthcare spending. Federal food stamps, those are things where you can't import a bunch of people into the country and let them starve. And especially in blue sanctuary states, the federal government subsidizes some of these programs and the dollars get all mixed because it's all fungible. You have something also very explicit. I went to Springfield, Ohio. There is no evidence of people eating dogs or eating cats. What there is evidence of is the entire economy in a crisis. And everyone in Springfield agrees that the Haitians are victims here. The villain is the government, and here's why. You have a lot of these migrants who are not illegal because they've been granted TPS, and a part of TPS, they get federally funded Medicaid and federally funded food stamps. You have these local slumlords that negotiate their employment contracts with Dole fruit manufacturing and Dole fruit packaging. And they explicitly say, you can pay these Haitian migrants, bottom of the barrel wages because they have federally funded healthcare. And that undercuts the local market rate of labor, which is not free market economics. That's not capitalism. And the people the worst off there are the Haitians that are making slave wages. It's not good for anybody. Importing, and again, I'm not opposed to people that come into the system the correct way, where you don't need, subsidized housing, and where you can speak the language, where you have enough translators, where you learn English. That's not what's happening here. Instead, it's a bunch of very cheap labor that has to be subsidized by you and me. And at the same time, it's undercutting the wages of everyone else that's already here.
Yeah. Slave labor is not free markets. It's a really wonderful way to put that. Tiana, appreciate you as always. Dynamite. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.